Welcome, everyone, to another installment of the Dallas Housing Coalition's webinar series, Housing for All. My name is Andrea Gillespie, and I'm Senior Manager of Community Development at Charles Schwab Bank, and your host of our webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in after our 2-week hiatus. In each episode of the Housing for All webinar series, we have brief but impactful one-on-one conversations with Dallas Housing Coalition members and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping the city affordable. Joining us this morning is Philip Kingston. Philip obtained an BA in economics from Trinity University and a JD from Baylor University. He served on Dallas City Council representing District 14 that covers the downtown area and immediate areas that surround the downtown area from 2015 to 2019. Leading up to and during his time on City Council, Philip worked as an attorney on commercial litigation and employment law. Today, he continues to work in law, serves as a professional community advocate on many issues, including affordable housing, and hosts a regular podcast on Spotify called Loserville. The podcast focuses on Dallas politics and hosts guests like Texas Representative John Bryant and City Councilwoman Paula Blackman, among many others. Hi, Philip. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Andrea.
Well, we can just get launched into our conversation. Considering your very extensive and laudable biography, I'm wondering if you can share with us, as someone who held public office, what got you started in the world of advocacy and what keeps you involved in advocacy today?
Well, I started out in politics back in high school, and for a very short period of time, I was a professional campaign worker until I got really tired of being poor. And then I went to law school, which is just a different form of advocacy. And then, going back into politics, serving on city council and working on a lot of campaigns, that's essentially what I offer to clients these days is professional advocacy, strategy, communications. I'm a pretty good lawyer, but my higher value really is the strategy and communication piece. And so a lot of my work is no longer like courtroom advocacy, although I still represent a good number of very important clients in courtroom proceedings. But for instance, in the last year, I think I secured in the neighborhood of $100 million in public incentives for development clients. Most of those clients are working in mixed income housing or affordable housing, which there's really no difference anymore because it's almost impossible to do a 100% affordable development. And we maybe don't even want those anymore. But that consumes a lot of my time now, is essentially advocating for affordable housing developers at the city and state level.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that so much of what you do today aligns with the spirit and the work of the Dallas Housing Coalition. And I'm also was really excited to hear that you host a podcast as a podcast junkie myself, Loserville, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, which is focused on Dallas politics. And I'm curious, between your time in City Council and with the podcast and the guests that you bring on, what have you seen change or maybe not change over the last year related to affordable housing development in Dallas?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's over the last year, but over the last 3 or 4 years, city council, but more importantly, the city manager's office got intensely more serious about actually producing affordable units. And I think, with the city manager departing, one of his best legacies here in Dallas will be the city's portfolio of city-owned affordable housing. He did a lot toward acquiring dead hotels and dead apartment complexes that the city's going to be able to use basically in perpetuity to provide housing for people who really need it. And I think that's extremely valuable. The council, I mean, it had a $41 million incentive package that was turned down by the TIF board in October, and in November, the council unanimously reversed them and gave us that money. Now I mean, I have to say, this is bragging a little bit, but I was surprised. I was very surprised with that outcome. I didn't anticipate getting 15 votes for that, but that's what happened. And there's no, I as a local politics podcaster have no end of criticisms of the city council. However, that's one area in which they really can't be criticized.
Mm-hmm. That's really exciting. I had no idea that had happened, and I'm sure many of our viewers are really heartened to hear that as well. Given the success that you've seen and you shared just now, on the flip side, what types of regulatory or policy barriers have you seen that do still hinder affordable housing development? And how might these barriers be addressed through policy, advocacy, or reform?
It's the ones that the city can handle are the ones everybody's already talked about, which is zoning. The city has been pretty serious about putting money into housing, but the failure of the housing bond proposition is truly disheartening. And it was the result of a really bastardized compromise at city council that was proposed, frankly, by Tanel Atkins. And so I guess I just got finished praising council, and now I'm right back to my professional critics job of chastising them a little bit. But yeah, the bond package that is being sent to the voters is really disappointing from a housing perspective, but also from several other perspectives. It has far too much money for streets. And what we know from the last few years is that the city has not been serious at all about doing complete streets development that benefit pedestrians and cyclists as well as cars. And so that's going to be a real problem. The bigger issue that we could really use help with, so Dallas is an interesting market because it is so big. The zoning problem is a problem. I'm not minimizing that, but Dallas doesn't have the same land shortage as other places. It has a shortage in high opportunity areas, and that's been a real challenge. But right now, the very specific things that are holding back affordable housing, for getting projects to pencil, to make them economically viable, two things are just killing us right now. One is construction materials costs. And the other is insurance. There are projects right now that are ready to go, but they wind up being not economically viable because of the projected insurance costs. And that is ludicrous. So there are a couple of things that are driving these factors. On the construction material side, I think there's too much concentration in the supplier market for that stuff. And it has allowed, even though the market has cooled off with the interest rates going up, construction materials didn't come down because the suppliers are able to quickly constrain the supply because they have market power, because they're not actually competing with each other. So that's something that the federal government could really, really help with. And I have actually filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission about that because it's really ridiculous. What we should have seen in the last 6 months as interest rates caused the market for construction to cool off, we should have seen the materials costs just plummet. And that did not occur at all. On the insurance side, the feds could help with that, but really the person charged in our state government with handling that stuff is, well, it's two people, the director of the Department of Insurance and the attorney general. And neither one of those two people currently have any real interest in helping consumers and affordable housing developers with their insurance costs. And that's just, that's just political bullshit. It's frankly just the result of living in a red state.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing challenges that people may not think about initially when it comes to affordable housing development. I think that we're well aware of some of the public constraints related to funding, but there are more structural issues that affect development, like zoning, insurance costs, which I have heard throughout the country that lots of cities and states are facing, as well as supply chain and construction material costs. So thank you for raising those additional issues as well. Shifting gears a little bit, I want to now talk about the people who benefit from affordable housing development when it's done and it's done right. How can we ensure that affordable housing policies account for the experiences of historically marginalized communities who are also disproportionately impacted by our current affordable housing crisis?
That is a massive challenge. Part of the challenge arises from the sort of structural lack of communication between leadership and people who really need help. People who need help are, they're working hard and they don't have time to go to City Hall. They're not reading newsletters that you send to them. There's a real issue about how do you reach these people. And the applying for affordable housing, for instance, is a challenge. It's a paperwork challenge. It's not very friendly. The people who need the most help, sort of voucher holders, housing choice voucher holders, the process of getting enrolled to get a voucher is very difficult. And then you are, as a voucher holder, you're expected to do a bunch of paperwork for your landlord to get into a unit. That's not great. By the time you become a client of these organizations that manage vouchers, which the two primary ones in Dallas County are the Dallas Housing Authority and Dallas County's Housing Department. And both of those groups do a great job. I'm not critical of them. They're dealing with a regulatory morass that is thrust on them by the Housing Choice Voucher Program. And so there's a lot of requirements for tenants and landlords and the people who administer the vouchers that could be cleaned up in a big way. But even if you're just talking about somebody who just needs affordable housing, and I have a small real estate company, so I see this frequently, and we'll have a vacancy come up, and so we'll get a bunch of applications, and every time it just breaks my heart. I'll find somebody who's got a good job who wants to live in a unit we have, and there's no way I can rent to them because they would be so constrained by the cost of my unit compared to their income. And almost all of my units are technically affordable under the federal standard. We are mostly renting at 80% or under of the area median income. So many people, especially young people, have no idea that their salaries from a job that they're probably proud of qualifies them for affordable housing. And that's the state of the United States at this point. Most people working at entry level or just above entry level jobs qualify for affordable housing. There's not nearly enough supply for all those people, but also a lot of them don't even know that they should go ask. And if, honestly, if somebody who is income constrained is listening to this and needs help getting into a unit like that, that is somebody who should call me. Because I represent most of the big operators of affordable housing here in Dallas, and very happy to help people get in the queue because it takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah, you raised so many important issues. I think that one of the biggest ones is many times I think policymakers and public advocates even have the best of intentions about setting up systems that they think that can work, but they can only work for the person who's actually using the system. And so often we miss or don't pay enough attention to the experience of someone who needs housing at an affordable level and how they navigate and go through all the hoops and talk to landlords and work with, other community and public sector agencies to help address their challenge. And just what you said right now raises the importance of looking at that. And the last thing that you mentioned got me thinking of my first job out of school, which was over 20 years ago. My rent was $250 a month. Can you imagine? And that was with a roommate. Can
I
you
can,
even
but you should have
imagine
seen my
that happening
$200 a
now?
month
And I was a
apartment.
young professional out of grad school. That's not the world we're living in anymore.
No, in Dallas County, the cheapest place you're going to find for a one bedroom is going to be about $800 a month. And that place is going to be fucking terrible. Pardon my French. It's not going to be good. So, it's easy to do the math. The feds say that anything over 30% of your income that you're paying toward housing is unacceptable. It's going to cause you other problems in other areas. And in Dallas, that's even worse because the cost of transportation is so high. So you get people doubly constrained. By the time there are many, many, many people who are spending well over 50% of their income on keeping a roof over their head and getting back and forth to work. And that's just no way to live. You're not going to get ahead. You're not going to be able to build wealth and put yourself in a better situation. That's why we think that affordable housing is so important for younger people, because typically people don't need to live in affordable housing more than a few years before their professional situation allows them to kind of, sit on their own bottom. And this is the goal for there. There are many other communities of people who need longer term affordable housing, and that's fine. Like, people who are disabled should be able to have a roof over their heads just like everybody else. I don't think people disagree with that. If you really sit them down and say, do you want disabled people in the street? The answer is no. But the question is, how do we get there? How do we incentivize landlords to take the vouchers? How do we get them to people who need them? And I don't want to be construed as being critical of the or people and organizations who are doing outreach to people who need affordable housing. Every single homeless services provider is trying to match clients with vouchers. So it's not like people aren't trying. I don't want it to sound like that. It's just that the constraint of the supply and the complexity of getting people into affordable housing, both of those things are putting people in situations where even if they're working hard, they aren't getting anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better, and that's why I'm the moderator and you're a guest today. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to just say how appreciative that the Dallas Housing Coalition is for your participation, support at the many public awareness events that the coalition held during I guess, City Council hearings around the 2024 City of Dallas Bond Initiative. So thank you for that. And along those lines, I'm wondering, what strategies have you seen that have been the most successful in garnering support for public housing among government officials, other types of key stakeholder groups that have sway in what we do or what our response is as a community to the affordable housing challenge?
The most effective new strategy that's sort of popping up in Dallas, it has existed in other places for longer, is publicly owned facilities. I mentioned the stuff that TC had secured for the city of kind of existing stock of housing units, but both the county and the city have embarked on using county-owned or city-owned land to develop affordable housing. The developers who, especially the LIHTC developers, can make this model work very well for them because their revenue is usually much more tied to development fees that are accounted for in the LIHTC rules than the ultimate profitability year over year of the project once it's finished. And if the city and county don't really care about profit because they're not trying to make a profit, they're trying to provide affordable housing for people, that creates a very beneficial partnership. And so the county did that, embarked on its first project 2 or 3 years ago on South Beckley, where they were going to replace an obsolete county building that served as a courthouse and many other functions. And they replaced it with this fabulous facility that's on Jefferson now. And they took the land where that place was and they gave it to Catholic Housing Initiative and said, hey, build us a mixed income apartment complex. And so that, I think, is just a few months from coming online. Catholic Housing Initiative has done a fantastic job. And it's like 260 units, and half of them are affordable at several different levels of affordability, all the way down to 30% AMI. I assume our audience knows what these initializations mean. There's a lot of jargon in affordable housing, and I don't want to bog us down with doing a primer. Call me if you need an explanation. I'm happy to teach. But
I'll just say that means that people of a variety of income levels can benefit from what Catholic Housing has been able to do.
Yeah, affordable housing developers have been rightly criticized for only building to the highest revenue threshold of affordable housing, which is 80% of the area median income. So you're talking in Dallas today, you're talking about people who are making $57,000 a year. That doesn't sound poor to anybody because it's not. And so the idea that a person at that level should be the primary beneficiary of affordable housing is not great. So we're looking for deeper affordability, and that's part of what publicly owned facilities can provide. The city is in the process of buying a piece of property in North Dallas for one of my clients, who will then construct a mixed income project there. And I think that this is a really powerful idea. I'm going to be meeting with a very good affordable housing developer in the next couple of weeks to talk about getting DISD involved in building housing. And this is something I've talked with Superintendent Elizalde about, and she's very open to this idea. And it's something I've been pitching to DISD for over 10 years that they've never really wanted to do. And I think the change in administration has invigorated their interest in providing affordable housing. Because the district's biggest revenue problem is loss of enrollment. They were losing enrollment in the 2000s and 2010s to the suburbs. And then after COVID, the attendance has just not bounced back at all. So the state funds the school district per student per day, which is a really weird thing to do, but that's the way it works. And so their funding gap right now is almost entirely due to loss of enrollment. So if you can build affordable housing, those people who use that housing are going to put their kids in the school, especially if the housing is built on top of the school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's really a great example of public-private partnership that you just shared with what the city is doing in acquiring land, acquiring, buildings that can then be redeveloped for affordable housing by organizations like Catholic Housing that have the expertise to make that happen. So thanks so much for really walking us through that very real world example and showing how it works. We're running towards the end of our time. I have so many questions that I wanted to ask you that we might not be able to get to, but just as a final reflection, many of the viewers today obviously care about affordable housing in Dallas, are members of the Dallas Housing Coalition. And I'm wondering if you can share any advice for our listeners and members of the coalition about what it takes to challenge affordable housing. I'm sorry, what it takes to champion affordable housing impactfully. What would your advice be?
You know, when I when I first got elected, John Bryant, who's now our representative, uh, said, when he got first elected, he thought that everybody in public life would take a look at the data that were available on a given topic and try to come to the best solution given what we knew about the issue. And he told me to stop expecting people to do that because that's not how they actually make decisions. People come from all kinds of different backgrounds. No one can agree on what data mean anyway. So the idea is you're always looking for the thing that speaks to the person you're trying to advocate to. And with affordable housing, it's frequently human stories of the difference that whatever affordable housing has been provided to somebody has made for them, or conversely, stories of people suffering. And there are unfortunately a lot of those stories. But telling those stories is very valuable. When I was working for the Hamilton Properties on their Lone Star gas lofts case with the city, one of the things that we did that was extremely powerful that we did by accident is I called in some reporters to talk about why this project was being threatened by the city reneging on a grant that it had committed to. And after the reporter interviewed me, he stuck around and found one of our residents. Well, it happened to be one of our residents who was living in an affordable unit there because it's so close to Baylor, which is where he needed to go for his cancer treatments. So that's a pretty good piece of video. I've got that one saved.
Yeah, storytelling is just, it goes back to my earlier question about tapping into people with lived experience in this issue and lifting up those stories and providing a human face to these very technical, deeply structural and systemic issues, I think goes a long way in breaking down misconceptions, raising public awareness, and hopefully building a broader base of advocates. So thank you, Philip, so much for joining us today and sharing your unique perspective as a former Dallas City Council person
A
and
survivor of Dallas City Council.
Yes, I hear that, and in continuing professional and impassioned community advocate. As 2024 continues to roll on, we wish you much success this year.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. And to all our viewers, before we sign off today, I just wanted to remind you that you can follow all of Dallas Housing Coalition socials to learn how you can get involved in some of the issues you've heard about today, and also stay connected to the next installment of our Housing for All webinar series. Also, be sure to visit the Dallas Housing Coalition website at dallashousingcoalition.com to learn more about the member organizations and individual supporters like Philip. And while you're there, if you're not already a member of the coalition, you can join right from the website. Thank you again to everyone who's tuned in to another installment of our Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Thank you again and have a wonderful weekend. Take care.